Some rooms just feel cramped. Low ceilings, bulky furniture, heavy curtains that block light. It's as if the walls are inching closer. And it's not only about how the room looks, it's about how it makes you feel. A small, cluttered room can affect how you move, think, and relax. The good news? You don't need to knock down walls to change that. With the right use of light, color, proportion, and smart furniture choices, you can make a room feel open and welcoming. In this episode, we'll explore how space tricks the eye and share over 20 practical ideas, from hanging curtains high to using mirrors and vertical storage, that you can try today. We'll also look at tiny apartments around the world that feel surprisingly spacious thanks to clever design. Even the smallest space can feel generous if you know how to make it work for you. A small room often feels small because of the way our brains process space. The walls, the ceiling height, the size and shape of the furniture, and even the objects we leave out in the open all send signals to our minds. These signals tell us whether a space is open or crowded, calm or cramped. It's not always about the actual measurements of a room. Two rooms with the same square footage can feel completely different depending on what's inside them and how those elements interact. One key factor is visual weight. Visual weight is how heavy or bulky something appears to the eye, not what it actually weighs. A large, dark leather sofa in the center of a small living room has high visual weight. It takes up space physically and also blocks the flow of sight. A lighter sofa with slim legs and a pale fabric may take up the same amount of floor space, but the eye passes through and around it more easily, which makes the room feel less full. The same principle applies to objects. A coffee table made of solid wood all the way to the floor feels heavier than one with a glass top and open sides, even if they have the same dimensions. Clutter is another major influence. The human eye looks for patterns and open areas to rest. When surfaces are filled with small objects, books stacked sideways, cords snaking along the floor, dishes on every counter, the eye has no place to pause. The brain reads this as a busy, tight environment. That's why people often describe a cluttered space as feeling smaller, even if nothing has changed about the room itself. It's also why hiding items in closed storage, grouping objects, or removing excess decor can change the atmosphere so quickly. Light is one of the most powerful tools for shaping how we perceive size. Our eyes naturally move toward light sources. In a small room with heavy curtains or dark walls, light gets trapped, and the edges of the space fade into shadow. That lack of clarity makes it hard to read the room's boundaries, and the brain interprets it as smaller. When light is allowed to spread across walls, floors, and ceilings, whether it's natural sunlight or well-placed artificial light, it creates a sense of openness. This is why designers often use pale, reflective colors in small spaces. Light bounces, surfaces feel brighter, and the brain registers a larger area. Lines also matter. Vertical lines, like tall bookshelves or floor-to-ceiling curtains, pull the eye upward and emphasize height. Horizontal lines, such as long, low shelves or rugs with stripes running across the room, can make a space feel wider. Diagonal lines, especially in flooring or patterned rugs, add movement and draw attention away from the actual shape of the room. By guiding the eye in certain directions, lines change the way the brain maps the space. Proportion is the third major piece. This is about the relationship between the size of objects and the size of the room. A small room with oversized furniture feels crowded because the scale is off. But using furniture that is too small can make it look like a dollhouse, which also feels uncomfortable. Getting proportion right means choosing pieces that fit the dimensions of the room and allow for movement. Even a large item can work in a small space if it's balanced by enough open area around it. There's a micro apartment in New York City that shows how these principles come together. The apartment is just under 200 square feet, about the size of a one-car garage. Before its redesign, it had a heavy, dark sofa against one wall, a bulky bed against the other, and a small dining table crammed into the corner. The windows were covered with thick blinds, and the walls were painted in a warm beige that absorbed more light than it reflected. Walking in, the space felt boxed in and dim. The redesign started with color. The walls, ceiling, and trim were painted in the same pale, almost white shade. This created a seamless look, so there were no hard edges between surfaces. The windows were left bare, except for light, sheer panels that filtered the sun without blocking it. The floor, which had been a dark wood, was refinished in a lighter tone to reflect more light upward. Furniture was chosen for visual lightness and correct proportion. The old sofa was replaced with a love seat on slim metal legs, which allowed light and sight lines to pass underneath. The bed was swapped for a platform with built-in drawers, eliminating the need for a separate dresser. This reduced clutter and freed up floor space. The dining table was replaced with a narrow drop-leaf table that could fold against the wall when not in use. Two transparent acrylic chairs completed the setup without adding visual bulk. Lines were used deliberately to change the sense of height. A tall shelving unit was placed on one side of the room, filled with a combination of books and storage baskets. This pulled the eye upward and balanced the horizontal line of the love seat on the opposite wall. The shelving also provided vertical storage, which meant fewer items needed to be left on the floor or counters. Mirrors were added strategically. One large mirror was mounted opposite the window, reflecting natural light into the farthest corners. Another was placed near the entry to give a sense of depth as soon as someone walked in. Both mirrors expanded the visual boundaries without actually increasing the space. The end result was striking. The same square footage now felt open and livable. Visitors often guessed it was at least 50 square feet larger than before. That change came entirely from how the brain processed the environment. Less visual weight, better proportion, controlled lines, and abundant light. This apartment shows that making a small space feel bigger is not about buying more or spending more. It's about understanding how perception works and making choices that guide the eye and mind toward openness. Even the smallest space can be made to feel generous when its design works with, rather than against, the way we experience it. Light shapes the way we see space more than any other single element. A room with the same size and furniture can feel twice as big if it's filled with soft, even light. This is because light defines edges, shows depth, and creates contrast. Our eyes move toward it, and when a space has light flowing through it, the brain interprets openness. In a small room, that effect can mean the difference between feeling boxed in and feeling at ease. The most effective light is the kind that comes from outside. Natural light has a broad spectrum that makes colors appear truer and textures softer. When it enters a room freely, it blurs the boundaries between indoors and outdoors, which extends the perceived depth. In many homes, heavy blinds, thick drapes, or ornate valances interrupt this flow. They block the edges of the window, darken the glass, and frame the view in a way that narrows it. Even when they're open, these treatments can shade parts of the window and cut down on brightness. Replacing heavy window coverings with sheer curtains or even leaving the windows bare changes the experience immediately. Sheers filter the glare without shutting out the view, allowing light to spread evenly across the room. They move with the breeze, softening the edges of the window frame. Without dense fabrics absorbing it, sunlight reflects off nearby walls and floors, brightening corners that would otherwise stay dim. Another way to work with natural light is to hang curtains higher than the window frame. When the curtain rod is mounted close to the ceiling, the fabric draws the eye upward, elongating the walls. This makes the window seem taller and the ceiling feel higher. Letting the curtains fall all the way to the floor completes the vertical line, even if the actual window is modest in size. Pulling the fabric back fully so it sits outside the glass also exposes the entire window, letting in as much light as possible. The color of the room is just as important as the openness of the windows. Light colors reflect more light, which helps it travel farther through the space. When walls, ceilings, and trim are painted in the same light shade, there are fewer sharp breaks between surfaces. This removes visual boundaries and allows light to glide across the room without interruption. A white ceiling with slightly darker walls can visually cap the room and make it feel lower. Painting everything in one soft, pale tone, white, cream, or a muted pastel, avoids that effect. Gloss level plays a role as well. A matte finish absorbs more light and gives a softer look, while a satin or eggshell finish reflects a bit more without creating harsh glare. On trim and doors, A semi-gloss finish can add a slight highlight that helps define the architecture without cutting the space into smaller sections. Floors in lighter tones, bleached wood, pale tile, or light rugs also bounce light back into the room, brightening it from below. Mirrors can extend the reach of natural light, but their placement is critical. A mirror placed directly across from a window doubles the view and sends daylight deeper into the room. Angled mirrors can reflect light toward dark corners. Even a mirrored piece of furniture, like a small cabinet, can catch and scatter light that would otherwise be lost. The goal is to place reflective surfaces where they can catch sunlight during most of the day, rather than just in one short window of time. A Scandinavian studio apartment in Copenhagen illustrates these principles well. The space measured less than 300 square feet and originally felt dark and tight. The single window faced a narrow alley, and thick brown curtains blocked much of what little light came in. The walls were painted in a warm beige, and the ceiling was off-white, which created a slight visual break that lowered the sense of height. The furniture was dark wood, and a heavy black rug covered most of the floor. The redesign began by stripping away the heavy curtains and replacing them with simple white linen sheers. The rod was mounted 6 inches below the ceiling and extended past the width of the window, so when the curtains were pulled open, they framed the view without covering the glass. This allowed the entire window to act as a light source. The walls, ceiling, and trim were painted in the same soft white. The floorboards, once a medium oak, were sanded and whitewashed. This not only reflected more light, but also tied the floor visually to the walls, making the whole space feel continuous. Furniture was chosen in lighter tones, with wood in natural or white finishes. The black rug was replaced with a flat woven pale gray one, which defined the seating area without absorbing the light. A large rectangular mirror was hung opposite the window, reflecting both the daylight and the soft folds of the linen curtains. Another smaller mirror sat on a shelf angled toward the back corner of the room, bouncing light into what had been a shadowed spot. Even with the same small footprint, the apartment felt open. The light from the alley was no stronger than before, but it now reached farther into the room and illuminated more surfaces. The pale colors allowed that light to spread. The vertical curtain lines gave the impression of taller walls, and the mirrors multiplied what was available. The overall effect was a space that felt fresh and airy despite its size and limited natural light source. This example shows that light is not only about how much you have, but also about how you handle it. By controlling window treatments, extending lines upward, and choosing colors that reflect rather than absorb, you can make the most of what's already there. In a small room, every extra inch of visible height, every corner lit, and every surface that carries light forward contributes to an environment that feels larger than its measurements suggest. Furniture plays a bigger role in how a room feels than people often realize. It's not just about how much floor space a piece occupies, it's also about how it affects sightlines, light, and movement. In a small room, too many items or the wrong kinds of pieces can make the whole space feel cramped. Choosing the right furniture and arranging it with care can open the room without adding a single square foot. One of the most common mistakes in a small space is using many small pieces in the hope that it will keep the room from feeling crowded. In reality, the opposite happens. A cluster of small chairs, tables, and shelves chops the room into fragments, and the eye has to stop and start repeatedly as it moves through the space. This constant interruption makes the area feel busy and smaller than it is. Using fewer, larger pieces can actually make the space seem bigger. For example, one long sofa can create a sense of order where 3 small armchairs would create clutter. A single large dining table can look cleaner than several smaller surfaces scattered around. The key is to leave enough open space around the piece so it doesn't overwhelm the room. Another way to keep the space open is to choose furniture with visible legs. When you can see under a chair, sofa, or bed, light flows beneath it, and the floor stays visible. This creates the illusion that the room is more open because the furniture doesn't block the line of sight from wall to wall. Solid pieces that rest directly on the floor, like a boxy sofa with no gap underneath, cut off the visual flow. Even if 2 sofas take up the same amount of space, The one with raised legs will feel lighter and less imposing. Transparent materials have a similar effect. Glass, acrylic, or other see-through surfaces reduce visual weight because the eye can look beyond them. A glass coffee table, for example, lets you see the rug beneath it, so the table feels almost like it's not taking up any space at all. Acrylic chairs can function as full-sized seating while barely interrupting the view across the room. This doesn't mean every surface has to be clear, but using transparency in one or two key places can make a big difference in how open the space feels. Pulling furniture away from the walls can also change the dynamic of a small room. It's natural to think that pushing everything against the edges will create more central space, but it often has the opposite effect. When furniture hugs the walls, the center can feel empty and flat, and the pieces can appear to be clinging to the boundaries. Moving a sofa just a few inches forward and placing a narrow console or shelf behind it can make the room feel more intentional and layered. Similarly, floating a reading chair and small table in a corner instead of cramming them against the wall can give the sense that the space is larger because there's room to move around them. A small flat in Hong Kong offers a clear example of these ideas in action. The apartment measured just 200 square feet and served as both home and workspace for its owner. Before its redesign, the main living area was crowded with small mismatched furniture: a short sofa, a pair of stools, a folding dining table, and several rolling carts. Almost every wall had something pushed up against it, and there was no clear open view from one side of the room to the other. Despite the small size of each piece, the room felt packed. The redesign began with removing most of the furniture and replacing it with a few larger, more functional pieces. A long, narrow sofa replaced the short one and the stools. It had slim metal legs that raised it off the floor, which allowed light to travel underneath. This change alone exposed more of the floor and made the room seem wider. The folding table was replaced with a small round glass dining table set in the center of the living area. The glass top allowed the patterned rug beneath to remain visible, and the round shape created easier movement around it in a tight space. For seating, the designer chose two clear acrylic dining chairs. They provided full comfort for meals and work, but were almost invisible in the room. From certain angles, they seemed to disappear entirely, leaving the table floating in the middle of the space. This transparency allowed the window view beyond the table to remain unobstructed, which made the whole apartment feel deeper. To avoid the flat, perimeter-bound layout, the sofa was pulled about a foot away from the wall, with a narrow console table placed behind it. This table held a slim lamp and a few personal items, which freed up other surfaces from clutter. The gap between the sofa and the wall created a shadow line that made the wall appear farther away, subtly enlarging the space in the mind's eye. The result was striking. By using fewer pieces, raising them on legs, introducing transparency, and allowing space around each element, the room became easier to navigate and more pleasant to be in. Visitors often assumed that furniture had been removed simply to stage the apartment, but in reality, the owner used the space daily in this setup. Everything had a clear purpose, and the room's openness came from how the pieces interacted, not from a lack of function. This approach works in many kinds of rooms. A bedroom can feel more open when a bed is raised on legs instead of sitting on a platform that touches the floor. A home office can benefit from a glass desk that lets light flow through instead of a solid wood one that blocks the view. Even in a kitchen, bar stools with slim legs or open backs keep the sight lines clear. Each choice reduces the visual blockages that make a small room feel closed in. In spaces where square footage is limited, furniture needs to do more than provide a place to sit or store items. It has to shape how the room is seen and experienced. By focusing on scale, leg visibility, transparency, and placement away from walls, it's possible to make the same floor area feel more generous and more functional. When floor space is limited, the most effective way to expand a room's function and presence is to use the height that's already there. Many small rooms have more vertical space than they seem to at first glance, but it often goes unused. By drawing the eye upward, you change how the brain reads the dimensions of the room. Instead of focusing on the narrow width or short length, the gaze takes in the vertical reach, which creates a sense of openness and balance. One of the most straightforward ways to do this is with tall shelving units. When storage stops halfway up the wall, the unused space above becomes wasted potential. A tall bookcase or shelving system not only provides more storage, but also pulls the eye to the ceiling. Even if the upper shelves are not in constant use, they serve as visual anchors. They make the ceiling feel higher because the furniture leads the gaze upward. The same idea applies to kitchen cabinets. Cabinets that end a foot or more below the ceiling leave a horizontal line that draws attention to where they stop, making the space feel shorter. Extending cabinetry all the way to the top eliminates that break and gives the impression of more height. Patterns can also play a strong role in directing attention upward. Vertical stripes on wallpaper, curtains, or even painted walls guide the eye from floor to ceiling. This elongation works in the same way as pinstripes on clothing. They create a visual path that suggests length. Stripes don't have to be bold to be effective. Even subtle changes in tone between the stripes can have the desired effect without overwhelming the space. The key is consistency in the direction so the lines remain clear. Lighting is another tool for building vertical emphasis. Hanging lights, such as pendant lamps or chandeliers, naturally lead the eye toward the ceiling. In a small room, a cluster of pendant lights at varying heights can add interest without taking up valuable surface area. Even a single pendant hung low over a table can create a strong vertical link between the floor and the ceiling. Wall-mounted sconces placed higher than the midpoint of the wall also lift the visual weight upward. Ceiling treatments can enhance the effect further. Many small rooms have plain white ceilings that do little to interact with the rest of the space. Painting the ceiling a color that contrasts slightly with the walls draws attention to it. For a more dramatic change, wallpaper with a subtle pattern can give depth to the ceiling plane, making it feel more expansive. In a room with good natural light, even a ceiling mural or a textured finish can make the overhead space part of the design rather than an afterthought. A Japanese tiny home illustrates how vertical thinking can transform a space. This home measured under 150 square feet and needed to accommodate sleeping, cooking, storage, and a small work area. Floor space was extremely tight, so the design focused on using every available inch of wall and ceiling height. Along one wall, a series of built-in cabinets rose from the floor all the way to the ceiling. The lower half contained everyday items, while the upper cabinets stored seasonal belongings and less frequently used equipment. The cabinet doors were finished in a light wood veneer that matched the flooring, helping them blend into the room while still creating a strong vertical presence. Above the work area, open shelving was installed just below the ceiling line. These shelves held books, small storage boxes, and decor, drawing the eye upward when entering the space. The kitchen area followed the same approach. Instead of stopping cabinets at head height, they extended to the ceiling, adding an extra row of storage for infrequently used cookware. This also removed the visual break that would have come from a gap between cabinet tops and the ceiling. The sleeping area took advantage of vertical height in a different way. A loft bed was built above a compact closet with a short ladder providing access. This design freed up the floor below for storage without sacrificing comfort. By stacking functions vertically, the home made use of its full volume instead of spreading everything across the limited floor area. Pattern and lighting reinforced the vertical focus. The curtains separating the sleeping area from the main space had thin vertical stripes in neutral tones, which extended the sense of height. Above the dining nook, a simple pendant light hung low over the table, creating a connection between the tabletop and the ceiling while leaving the surrounding floor clear. The ceiling itself was treated with a pale, textured wallpaper that caught light from the windows during the day. This made the ceiling a noticeable element in the design rather than a blank surface. In a space where every inch mattered, even the overhead plane became part of the strategy to make the home feel taller and more open. The impact of these vertical elements was clear. When someone entered the home, their eyes were drawn upward, taking in the height before they registered the limited floor space. The tall cabinets and shelving combined with the layered lighting and patterns, shifted focus away from the compact footprint. The room felt structured and spacious because it fully used the third dimension that many designs ignore. This approach works in more conventional homes as well. In a small living room, tall bookcases can flank a fireplace or TV, adding both storage and height. In a bedroom, a tall headboard can serve as a vertical anchor that makes the walls feel taller. Even in bathrooms, stacking storage vertically and placing lighting higher on the wall can make the space feel larger. The principle is simple. When you can't expand outward, expand upward and let the design lead the eye in that direction. Color and pattern control how the eye reads a room. In a small space, they can either smooth the flow so the walls and furnishings feel connected, or they can break it into pieces that look cramped. When you want a room to feel bigger, the safest starting point is a monochromatic scheme. This means using one color in different shades and tints across walls, floors, furniture, and even decor. By keeping the variation within a narrow range, you remove strong visual breaks. The eye moves across the space without stopping at sharp contrasts, which makes the boundaries feel less defined and the room feel more open. A monochromatic room does not have to be flat or dull. You can layer texture to add depth. Matte walls, a soft wool rug, linen curtains, and a smooth painted side table can all share the same color family, but still create interest. In a small living room, painted pale gray, a slightly deeper gray sofa, a lighter gray rug, and shelves in the same wall color will blend into a seamless whole. The furniture appears to float rather than stand out as separate blocks. Tone-on-tone furniture works on the same principle. A white sofa against a white wall will seem lighter and less bulky than a dark sofa in the same spot. The outlines blur, and the piece becomes part of the architecture rather than a freestanding object. The same is true for storage. A cabinet painted to match the walls will recede, while one in a contrasting color will push forward and claim more visual space. In a bedroom, a headboard covered in fabric that matches the wall color can create a calm, unbroken field, which is especially useful if the wall is short. Patterns must be chosen with care in a small space. Large-scale patterns can overwhelm the proportions, while too many small, busy patterns can create visual noise. Small-scale patterns that repeat gently, like fine herringbone, small checks, or subtle floral prints, can add movement without crowding the space. On upholstery or bedding, these patterns keep the surface from feeling flat while still allowing the room to breathe. Stripes are a special case. They can reshape how we read a room. Vertical stripes draw the eye upward, making the ceiling seem higher. Horizontal stripes make a wall appear longer. This can be done with paint, wallpaper, or even striped textiles like rugs and curtains. The key is to keep the colors within a similar range so the stripes stretch the dimensions without cutting the room into harsh sections. A Paris apartment in the Marais district shows how these ideas can work together. The space measured just over 250 square feet and had awkward proportions, narrow with high ceilings. The owner wanted to make the most of the height while also giving the apartment a sense of style. Before the redesign, the walls were painted in 3 different colors: cream in the living area, dark green in the kitchen corner, and pale yellow in the sleeping alcove. The changes in color marked the boundaries between functions, but they also made the apartment feel chopped into even smaller pieces. The designer chose a monochromatic approach in a soft ivory tone. The walls, ceiling, and trim were painted in the same color, and the kitchen cabinets were refinished to match. The bed's headboard was upholstered in a fabric that blended perfectly with the walls, so the alcove became part of the whole rather than a separate pocket. This removed the abrupt visual breaks and let the eye travel across the apartment in one sweep. To add energy without losing the seamless flow, the designer introduced a bold pattern on one wall of the living area: narrow, black and white vertical stripes. The stripes were fine enough not to overpower the room, but they drew the eye up to the tall ceiling. This emphasized the height and balanced the narrow footprint. The wall with stripes also held a simple white sofa, whose color matched the background of the pattern. As a result, the sofa did not interrupt the stripes, but seemed to sit lightly against them. Furniture followed the tone-on-tone rule. The dining table was a slim white piece with chairs painted in the same ivory as the walls. Even the shelving was matched to the wall color, with only a few carefully chosen objects on display, most of them in the same color range. This approach kept the overall look cohesive and avoided the cluttered feeling that comes from mixing many contrasting tones in a small area. Patterns appeared again in smaller details. The rug under the dining table had a fine diamond weave in 2 shades of ivory, which gave texture without breaking the flow. The bedding in the alcove had a tiny repeating dot pattern in soft gray, adding variety without calling attention to the bed as a separate area. The balance between plain surfaces and quiet patterns made the apartment feel both open and layered. The use of stripes on just one wall was deliberate. Covering all 4 walls might have been too strong, pulling the focus away from the height and instead boxing the space. By concentrating the stripes in one place, the designer created a vertical anchor that worked like a tall piece of furniture would, pulling the gaze upward but leaving the other walls free to recede. The placement of this striped wall opposite the main window also meant that daylight played across it, this softening the contrast between the black and white and preventing it from feeling harsh. The transformation was clear. Visitors entering the apartment now saw a tall, airy space with no obvious boundaries between the living, cooking, and sleeping areas. The monochromatic scheme removed the sense of fragmentation. The tone-on-tone furniture kept bulky items from crowding the space, and the carefully placed stripes stretched the vertical dimension. Small patterns in the textiles added comfort without weight. Even though nothing was done to expand the floor plan, the apartment felt larger and more balanced. This example shows that color and pattern are not just decorative, they are structural in how they guide the eye and define proportions. In small rooms, using them with intention can open the space in ways that physical changes often cannot. By limiting contrast, blending large pieces into the background, scaling patterns to fit the space, and using stripes strategically, you can shape how a room is experienced from the moment someone steps inside. Mirrors can change the way a room feels without altering its structure. They work by playing with light and perspective, 2 things that have a direct effect on how the brain measures space. When used well, a mirror can make a wall seem to disappear, brighten a dim corner, or even create the illusion of another room beyond the one you're standing in. In a small space, this can mean the difference between feeling enclosed and feeling open. Placement is the first consideration. A mirror across from a window is one of the most effective ways to bring in more light. The mirror reflects both daylight and the outdoor view, doubling their reach. If the window faces a garden, the reflection creates the sense of an additional opening, which makes the wall feel less like a boundary. Even in an urban setting, reflecting the sky or a tree outside softens the interior. A mirror near a light source can also help brighten a space after dark. Placing it so it catches light from a floor lamp or pendant can extend the glow to areas that the fixture doesn't directly reach. Large mirrors and mirrored furniture achieve different effects. A large mirror works like a secondary window, giving depth and openness to a wall. Floor-to-ceiling mirrors can make a room feel taller because they extend the visible lines of the walls and floor. In a narrow hallway, a mirror at the end can give the impression that the space continues beyond the wall. Mirrored furniture, on the other hand, blends into its surroundings by reflecting them. A mirrored side table might sit in the middle of a living room, but seem to occupy no visual space because it shows only what's around it. This can be useful when you need storage or a surface in a tight area, but don't want the piece to add bulk. Combining mirrors with windows creates a strong illusion of added space. If a window is on one side of a room, placing a mirror on the opposite wall can create the impression of a second window. The reflected light and view balance the actual window, making the space feel more symmetrical and open. This technique is especially effective in rooms with only one window, where light and views are limited. The key is to position the mirror so that the reflection looks intentional and aligns with the real window. A London flat shows how powerful these illusions can be. The apartment measured just under 300 square feet and had a single large window in the living area. The rest of the walls were solid, and the narrow layout made the room feel closed off. The designer's goal was to create a sense of balance and to make the most of the daylight from that single window. The first step was placing a tall, narrow mirror directly across from the window. The mirror's frame matched the color of the wall, so it appeared almost as if there was a second window. During the day, sunlight from the real window hit the mirror, sending brightness into the far corners of the room. The reflection of the sky made the space feel less hemmed in by solid walls. To extend the effect, a second, larger mirror was placed on the wall adjacent to the window. This mirror caught light at an angle and reflected the dining area, making it seem like there was more space beyond. It also created a layered effect. From certain viewpoints, you could see the window reflected in the first mirror, and then that reflection caught again in the second mirror. This depth trick made the room appear wider than it actually was. Mirrored furniture was used to prevent the design from feeling heavy. The coffee table had mirrored sides, which reflected the rug and floor around it. As a result, it seemed smaller and lighter than its actual size. A small mirrored cabinet by the entry provided storage, but almost disappeared when seen from across the room because it reflected the pale wall behind it. These pieces didn't fight for attention, which kept the overall look calm and open. The designer also paid attention to the angles of reflection. It's not enough for a mirror to be large or bright. It matters what it shows. In this flat, no mirror reflected clutter or awkward corners. The tall mirror opposite the window showed the outdoor view. The large mirror to the side reflected the dining area and some of the kitchen, and the mirrored furniture showed clean floor space. Each reflection added to the sense of order and openness rather than distracting from it. The results were clear to anyone walking in. Visitors often assumed there were two large windows in the living area. They noticed the light first, and only later realized it was coming from reflections rather than multiple sources. The space felt balanced, with brightness and visual depth on both sides of the room. Even at night, the mirrors worked with the lighting to keep the room from feeling dim or enclosed. This project shows that mirrors can do more than just show a reflection. When placed thoughtfully, they can reshape the way a room is perceived, doubling the impact of natural light, extending views, and softening the boundaries that make a small space feel tight. Large mirrors work best for creating depth, while mirrored furniture can reduce visual weight in tight layouts. Placing mirrors in line with or opposite windows maximizes both light and the illusion of more openings. When every reflection is planned to enhance the room, the effect is seamless and convincing. In a small room, every object has more impact. The wrong mix of accents can overwhelm the space, but the right approach can make it feel balanced and open. This is why choosing decor with care is as important as selecting furniture. Scale, grouping, and texture all play a part in shaping how the room is experienced. Large-scale art is often a better choice than many small pieces. A single oversized canvas or framed print can anchor a wall without creating visual clutter. When a wall is filled with multiple small frames, the eye jumps from one to the next, creating a busy rhythm that makes the space feel crowded. One large piece draws focus and allows the surrounding wall to breathe. The size doesn't have to be extreme. Even a piece that fills half the wall height and width can serve as a visual anchor while leaving open space around it. In a living room, for example, a tall vertical painting above a sofa can create a strong focal point and emphasize the height of the room. Grouping decor items is another way to reduce visual noise. Instead of spreading objects evenly across every surface, placing them in clusters creates areas of interest with space in between. 3 vases of different heights on a sideboard, a stack of books topped with a sculptural object, or a set of framed photos arranged together on one shelf feels intentional. This leaves other surfaces clear, which makes the room feel less cluttered. The negative space around these groups is as important as the items themselves because it gives the eye places to rest. Plants can add life and openness to a small room. Greenery softens the lines of furniture and walls, and the organic shapes contrast with the straight edges of most interiors. Plants can also connect the inside to the outside, especially when they're placed near windows where they catch natural light. The choice of plant matters. Tall, slim plants like snake plants or fiddle-leaf figs can draw the eye upward without spreading out too far, while trailing plants like pothos can be placed on high shelves to add softness from above. Even small potted herbs in a kitchen can add freshness without taking much space. Natural textures work in a similar way. Materials like wood, rattan, linen, and stone add depth without heaviness. A woven basket can serve as storage while bringing in warmth. A linen throw on a sofa or a sisal rug underfoot can add texture that feels grounded and calm. These elements also help to balance other materials in the room, such as glass, metal, or painted surfaces, which might otherwise feel cold or flat in a small space. A Melbourne tiny home shows how these ideas can work together. The home measured under 250 square feet and needed to serve as a living, dining, and sleeping space. The walls were kept light and plain, so the accents would define character without adding clutter. Instead of filling the main wall with shelves and small frames, the owner chose one oversized piece of art, a black and white photograph printed on a canvas nearly 5 feet tall. The image was simple but bold, and it became the focal point of the living area. Because it was the only major wall decoration, the space around it felt open, and the room avoided the choppy look of multiple smaller pieces. Decorative items were grouped rather than scattered. On the low media cabinet under the art, there was a single cluster of objects: a ceramic vase with fresh eucalyptus branches, a small stack of books, and a shallow wooden bowl. The rest of the surface was empty, making the arrangement stand out without crowding the wall. On the dining table, only a single stoneware pitcher served as decoration. This approach left plenty of breathing room in the visual layout of the home. Plants played a key role in softening the compact space. A tall olive tree in a simple pot stood in one corner, its branches adding height without blocking light from the nearby window. A hanging planter with trailing greenery was suspended near the kitchen area, bringing softness to the high corner without using counter space. A few smaller potted plants were placed together on a floating shelf, grouped so they read as one element instead of multiple scattered items. The mix of heights and leaf shapes gave movement and life to the room. Natural textures tied the space together. The media cabinet was made from light oak, which added warmth to the white walls. A woven jute rug covered most of the floor in the living area, defining the space without closing it in. Linen cushions in muted colors were placed on the sofa, and a wool throw was draped over one arm. These materials added tactile interest and a sense of comfort without introducing bold patterns that could disrupt the room's calm feel. The effect was a home that felt curated but not overfilled. Visitors noticed the large photograph immediately, but because the rest of the decor was restrained, the piece didn't compete for attention. The plants and natural textures gave the home warmth and movement, while the grouped arrangements kept the surfaces clear and the space easy to navigate. Even though the home was small, it felt composed and open because every decorative choice had a clear purpose. This Melbourne example shows that in a small space, accents and decor are not about filling gaps, they are about shaping the room's rhythm. Large-scale art simplifies the visual field while still making a statement. Grouping decor keeps surfaces calm and organized. Plants and natural textures add life and balance without taking over the space. Together, these elements work to make a small room feel intentional and spacious, even when square footage is tight. Lighting in a small room does more than make it bright enough to see. The way light is placed and layered changes how the space feels and how the eye moves through it. A single ceiling fixture can leave corners in shadow and make the room feel flat. A thoughtful mix of light sources can add depth, highlight features, and free up valuable surfaces. Wall sconces are one of the most practical tools for small spaces because they lift lighting off tables and floors. A pair of sconces beside a sofa can replace the need for bulky table lamps, leaving side tables clear for other uses. In a bedroom, sconces mounted above or beside the headboard free up the nightstands and keep cords off the floor. They can also be positioned to direct light exactly where it's needed, angled down for reading or up for ambient glow. Because they are fixed to the wall, sconces don't block views or pathways, which helps maintain an open feel. Flush mount lighting works well in small rooms where ceiling height is limited, or where you want to avoid crowding the overhead space. A flush mount fixture sits close to the ceiling, spreading light across the room without hanging down into the visual field. This is especially useful in narrow hallways or low-ceilinged rooms, where a pendant or chandelier could feel intrusive. A well-chosen flush mount can still be attractive, acting as a subtle focal point without dominating the space. Layered lighting is the step that turns functional brightness into a sense of depth. It means having more than one type of light in the same space, ambient, task, and accent lighting working together. Ambient light fills the room evenly. Task lighting focuses on specific activities, like a desk lamp for writing or under-cabinet lighting in the kitchen. Accent lighting draws attention to features such as a picture light over artwork or a small spotlight on a textured wall. In a small room, layers can be created with fewer fixtures if each one serves more than one purpose. For example, a wall sconce might provide reading light and also wash the wall with a soft glow, which expands the sense of space. A Seattle apartment shows how layered lighting can transform a compact layout. The apartment measured about 350 square feet, with an open living, dining, and sleeping area. Before the redesign, a single ceiling fixture in the center of the room was the only permanent light source. The corners stayed dim, and the space felt smaller at night. The designer's goal was to brighten the apartment evenly without adding clutter. The first change was to replace the ceiling fixture with a low-profile flush mount that spread light more evenly across the room. This created a base layer of ambient light that reached the walls and softened shadows. Next, wall sconces were installed beside the bed area. These sconces had adjustable arms, allowing them to be used as reading lights or pivoted to bounce light off the wall for softer illumination. Their placement freed the nightstands for storage and kept cords organized along the wall. In the living area, a slim floor lamp with an upward-facing shade was placed in a corner. The upward light reflected off the ceiling, creating a second layer of ambient glow that worked with the flush mount to make the space feel taller. This corner had previously been in shadow, but with light now bouncing from above, it became a comfortable reading spot. Accent lighting was added in two places. A narrow picture light was mounted above a large framed print on the main wall. At night, this became a subtle focal point, drawing the eye away from the apartment's compact size. In the kitchen area, a strip of LED lighting was installed under the upper cabinets. This served as task lighting for cooking, while also casting a warm line of light along the backsplash, visually separating the kitchen from the rest of the room. The result was a room that felt brighter, more balanced, and larger than before. During the day, the lighting design supported natural light from the windows, filling in the shaded corners. At night, the layered lights allowed the owner to adjust the mood, using just the sconces and picture light for a calm evening, or all layers together for a lively gathering. Because the lighting came from multiple directions, the walls seemed to recede, and the ceiling appeared higher. This example shows that lighting is not only about wattage or fixture count. In small rooms, the placement and type of lighting affect the perception of space as much as they do visibility. Wall sconces keep surfaces clear and pathways open. Flush mounts spread light without intruding into the room. Layers of light add dimension and make the boundaries less defined. When these elements work together, they create a balanced, open feel that goes beyond simple illumination. In a small room, storage is not just about keeping things out of sight. It's about doing so without taking away from the feeling of space. When square footage is limited, every inch has to serve more than one purpose, and every piece has to be chosen with both function and visual weight in mind. Built-ins, multi-purpose furniture, and thoughtful underbed storage can keep a room organized while maintaining an open, balanced look. Built-ins are one of the most efficient ways to store items in a small space because they make use of areas that might otherwise go unused. A set of shelves or cabinets fitted to the exact dimensions of a wall can hold far more than a freestanding piece of furniture. Built-ins also create a clean, continuous line that helps the eye see the wall as one surface, rather than multiple disconnected pieces. In a living room, a built-in unit around a television can hold books, decorative objects, and electronics without spreading storage across several smaller items. In a bedroom, built-in wardrobes can stretch to the ceiling, eliminating wasted space at the top and keeping seasonal items within reach. Hidden compartments can be worked into built-ins or into furniture. A bench under a window might lift to reveal storage for blankets and pillows. A dining banquette can hide bins for table linens or small appliances. Even a set of stairs in a loft or tiny home can double as drawers or cupboards. These hidden areas keep the floor and walls free of extra pieces, which reduces clutter both physically and visually. Multi-purpose furniture adds storage while serving another role in the room. A storage ottoman can hold games, throws, or shoes, while also acting as a footrest or extra seat. Lift-top coffee tables hide compartments for remotes, chargers, or magazines and can convert into a small dining or work surface. Nesting tables can be stacked together when not in use, freeing up floor space, but pulled apart when needed for guests. In a bedroom, a headboard with built-in shelves can hold books, lamps, and decor without requiring extra bedside tables. Underbed storage works well when done with care. A bed frame with built-in drawers keeps items contained and dust-free while making use of space that might otherwise be wasted. For beds without drawers, low rolling bins can serve the same purpose. The key is to keep the storage visually clean. Bulky, mismatched boxes under the bed can make the room feel messy, even if the floor is clear. Choosing containers that match the bed frame or that are concealed behind a tailored bed skirt keeps the look streamlined. A tiny house in Oregon shows how these storage strategies can work together. The home measured just 180 square feet and needed to hold all the essentials for year-round living. The design began with built-ins along one wall, combining open shelves and closed cabinets that reached from floor to ceiling. The lower cabinets held kitchenware and pantry items, while the upper ones stored off-season clothes and gear. The uniform finish on the cabinetry matched the wall color, so the whole unit blended into the structure rather than looking like a bulky addition. The seating area was built on a raised platform with deep drawers underneath. These drawers held bedding, board games, and extra towels. The platform doubled as a small stage for gatherings, with cushions and a low table that could be moved aside when more floor space was needed. In the dining nook, a bench seat lifted to reveal bins for dry goods and cookware. The lift-top design meant storage could be accessed without moving everything off the bench first. The bed was placed in a loft, leaving the main floor open. The stairs leading up to the loft each contained a pull-out drawer, perfect for shoes, tools, and cleaning supplies. This made the stairs a functional storage unit without changing their footprint. In the loft itself, the low space at the foot of the bed was fitted with shallow drawers for clothes. These drawers were built into the loft platform, making use of an area too low to stand in but perfect for storage. Multi-purpose pieces were used throughout. A square ottoman in the living area had a removable top, providing storage for outdoor gear in the off-season. The kitchen counter extended into a fold-down table that could be used for dining or as a work surface, then tucked flat against the wall when not in use. Even the bathroom door had a storage roll. It was fitted with hooks and shallow racks on the inside, holding toiletries and cleaning supplies. Every storage choice in this tiny home was made with both capacity and appearance in mind. There were no mismatched plastic bins or overflowing shelves. Every compartment was sized for its contents, and every container was chosen to blend into the surrounding material. As a result, the home stayed organized without looking crowded, and the open floor space felt generous for its size. This Oregon example shows that storage in a small space is not just about where things go. It's about how storage is built into the structure, how it serves multiple purposes, and how it stays visually light. Built-ins remove the need for bulky freestanding pieces. Hidden compartments use overlooked areas. Multi-purpose furniture does double duty without demanding more space. Underbed solutions take advantage of what's already there. Together, these strategies allow a small space to hold more while still feeling open and livable. Design advice for small rooms often focuses on keeping things light, uncluttered, and minimal. These rules work well for making spaces feel larger, but they are not absolute. Sometimes, Breaking them with intention can create a room that feels richer and more personal. Strategic clutter and darker colors can add comfort and character without making the space feel closed in if handled with care. Strategic clutter is not the same as mess. It's about having visible objects that tell a story or give the space a lived-in feeling. A room stripped of almost everything can feel impersonal. A small reading chair with a stack of well-worn books beside it, a coffee table with a tray of collected objects, or a wall with a gallery of art and photographs can bring warmth. The difference lies in how it's arranged. Clutter that is grouped and intentional feels deliberate, while scattered items without order quickly overwhelm the eye. A small living room might have one open shelf filled with pottery, plants, and books arranged in varied heights. This adds texture and personality, but still leaves other surfaces clear, so the room maintains a sense of space. Dark colors are often avoided in small rooms because they can absorb light and make walls feel closer. But when used in the right way, they can create a sense of intimacy without suffocating the room. A deep navy wall behind a bed can frame the sleeping area and make it feel cozy, while the rest of the walls remain lighter. In a dining nook, rich green walls paired with warm wood furniture can make the space inviting, especially if lighting is layered to avoid shadows. Dark colors can also hide less than perfect surfaces and make bright accents stand out more. The key is balance, using darker shades in parts of the room where you want focus and keeping other areas lighter to maintain contrast. A case in point is a small reading nook in a London townhouse that was deliberately painted in a deep charcoal gray. The nook occupied a recessed corner off the main living room, just large enough for a chair, a side table, and shelves. Instead of painting it the same light color as the living area, the designer used the dark shade to make it a distinct, enclosed retreat. The shelves were built into the walls and painted the same charcoal, which made them blend in and let the books and objects stand out. To prevent the nook from feeling heavy, the designer introduced light in multiple ways. A brass wall sconce was mounted above the chair to provide direct reading light, and a small uplight on the floor washed the wall behind the chair, highlighting the paint's depth. Across from the chair, a narrow vertical mirror reflected light from the main living room into the nook. This combination of lighting created highlights on the dark surfaces, adding dimension and preventing the corners from disappearing into shadow. The styling embraced strategic clutter. The shelves held a mix of books, small framed photos, and a few textured ceramics, all arranged in tight groups. The side table had a single stack of books topped with a candle, keeping the surface usable but personal. A wool throw and a patterned cushion added softness without crowding the chair. The limited number of items and their careful placement ensured the nook felt full of character but not visually overwhelming. The dark color also served a psychological purpose. It defined the nook as a separate environment from the bright living room, signaling that it was meant for a different pace, slower, quieter, more private. Visitors described it as feeling tucked away rather than cramped. The rest of the living room remained light and airy, so the contrast between the two areas actually made the open space feel brighter by comparison. This approach works in other contexts too. A small bathroom painted in a rich, dark shade can feel like a private retreat, especially with good lighting and reflective surfaces. A kitchen with dark lower cabinets and lighter uppers can keep the base of the room grounded without pulling the walls inward. In each case, the dark color is used as an accent or a defining feature, not as a blanket over the whole space. The same applies to clutter. A wall of photographs in mismatched frames can be the highlight of a small hallway if the rest of the surfaces are kept clear. A work desk can hold jars of pens, a stack of notebooks, and a small plant without feeling messy if everything has its place and is grouped together. By giving each cluster of items space to breathe, the eye reads them as intentional arrangements rather than disorder. Breaking the rules in a small room requires knowing them well enough to decide where they can bend. Strategic clutter works because it tells a story and adds comfort, but it's balanced by empty space. Dark colors create intimacy when paired with light and reflective elements that keep the room from feeling closed in. The reading nook shows that a space can be moody and full of personality while still feeling open and usable. It's less about following a strict formula and more about creating the right mix for the way the room is meant to be experienced. We've covered a lot of ground, and by now you've seen how many different ways there are to make a small room feel bigger, brighter, and more comfortable. Light is one of the most powerful tools you have. Letting natural light in with sheer curtains, using pale wall and ceiling colors, and bouncing light around with mirrors can instantly open a space. Furniture choices matter just as much. Using fewer, larger pieces, keeping them on visible legs, and working in transparent materials can free the eye and make the floor space feel more generous. Going vertical changes the way a room is read. Tall shelves, full-height cabinetry, vertical stripes, and hanging lights pull the gaze upward and make the ceiling feel higher. Color and pattern work best when they're intentional. Monochromatic schemes, tone-on-tone furniture, small-scale patterns, and strategic stripes can guide the eye and smooth the flow. Mirrors, whether large panels or mirrored furniture, can double the impact of light and create the illusion of extra windows. Accents and decor work hardest when they're focused. Large-scale art keeps walls from looking cluttered, grouping objects reduces visual noise, and plants or natural textures soften edges and connect the inside to the outside. Lighting should be layered, ambient, task, and accent sources combined, to add depth and highlight features without crowding the space. Wall sconces free up tables, flush mounts keep the ceiling clear, and thoughtful placement of each light creates balance. Smart storage can make the difference between a space that works and one that frustrates. Built-ins, hidden compartments, multi-purpose furniture, and underbed solutions allow you to store more without adding bulk. And while rules help, knowing when to break them gives your space personality. Strategic clutter can tell a story, and dark colors can create intimacy without closing the room in, especially when they're balanced with good lighting and open areas. The key is to see each choice as part of a bigger picture. A room that feels larger isn't just the result of one trick, it's the effect of light, furniture, storage, color, and decor all working together. Sometimes the most dramatic changes come from the simplest adjustments, raising curtain rods, swapping one piece of furniture for another with lighter lines, or grouping your decor instead of spreading it across every surface. Every space is different, and what works in one room may not be right for another. That's why experimenting matters. Try shifting a mirror to catch more daylight, replace a rug with one that matches the wall color, or add a tall plant to draw the eye upward. Notice how each change affects the way the room feels, and don't be afraid to blend techniques until the space feels right to you. Even the tiniest room can have the biggest personality when you shape it with intention. It's not about pretending the room is something it's not. It's about making the most of what it is and letting it work for the way you live.